Welcome back, everybody. Thank you, Ari. We'll go straight to item 2.5, which is Destination Hauraki Coromandel Review Findings. Let me get to my right page.
176, Terry.
It's page 176. And we've got Jess. Welcome, Jess. Thank you. Mitch. Have we got Stephen online? Patrick online?
Yes.
Okay. Right, we'll hand straight over to you. Who's driving this? Is it you, Mitch, or Jess?
This is Jess today.
Jess. Fantastic. All right.
Thank
okay,
you.
Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. Today we present the Destination Hauraki Coromandel Review findings. You'll know that in December you requested a review of Destination Hauraki Coromandel, their purpose, performance and funding. We've extended that slightly and brought in some external consultants from Martin Jenkins, who we have on the line, Stephen and Patrick, who are with us, and conducted a review of Destination Hauraki Coromandel. That review also looked at things like governance, and it also did a high-level assessment of different models for providing destination management and marketing activity in the district. So extending on just looking at the current model of Destination Hauraki Coromandel. In the process, Martin Jenkins met with you all as councillors at the end of February, and they also met with Hauraki District Council staff, as we note that Hauraki District councillors did not request this review, but they are joint settlers of Destination Hauraki Coromandel. They also met with the chief executives of so Aileen and Langley, and interviewed some stakeholders from industry that had an overview or would have interacted with Destination Hauraki Coromandel. So with that, I'd just like to say thanks to those who were involved in the review process. Just of note, Destination Hauraki Coromandel and Hauraki District Council and those operators that were interviewed in the process. Just the high-level findings, the review found that Destination Hauraki Coromandel is operating in line with its core purpose, but that purpose and related performance expectations could be better clarified, set and communicated. And they are performing well to meet existing key performance indicators and rough return on investment measures. But there are some issues, challenges and opportunities where we could improve performance and operations. On the funding side, I noted that DHC is operating on a relatively low level of government funding compared to other RTOs, and they are quite effective and efficient in applying that funding. But there are also opportunities to seek greater private and non-local government funding. So those are the key findings from that review. We outline in our report a few options that Council might wish to consider, which are a range of endorsing and implementing the review recommendations. There are a series of recommendations as a result of the review, which you can find on the in the last 2 pages of the summary report. And these speak to things like improving engagement with industry and council, looking at monitoring and communication activity, so looking at KPIs, some letter of expectations, and also looking at reviewing the board, so governance arrangements. And there are also some recommendations around destination management planning and establishing a leadership group and more industry representation of that. So yes, I think I will leave it there and just welcome any questions through the review, and those that can be directed to the Martin Jenkins team who are online with us. Please do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Mitch, anything to add?
No, Jess has done a great job summing it up.
Okay. Patrick, Stephen, anything to add to what Jess has just given us?
No, I think she did a great job of summing up.
Yeah, I think the
Thanks,
combination of that and you've got the full report and the summary report as well. So I think it covers quite a lot of information.
Thank you. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, and then I'll open up for questions and discussion. So could I get a mover and a seconder, please? Deli, seconder? Peter, thank you. Right, councillors, we've got Martin. Any other? You go ahead, Martin, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to check. I mean, I've read through the report, but I just wanted to check. Presumably, Hauraki District Council will also be considering a similar range of options as to what we are here.
So let me jump in if I've missed something. But the councillors from it's Hauraki District Council, yes, did not request a review, and so we are working with HDC staff to we've provided them with a copy of the review findings, and they've also commented that they're in broad support of those, mainly because most of them are pretty operational. But we'll have to work through a process with them as well. We imagine taking it to their next council meeting, which is in June, in some form of a report, which would be either to inform them and or probably a combination of would they also support those recommendations if we were to adopt them too. So that's
Okay.
further.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, any further questions either of Jess or Mitch or the Martin Jenkins team? John Grant, please.
Thanks very much. Thank you for everybody who has done the work on putting this together. Some very interesting reading. My observations of this is we are extremely reliant on effective tourism in the area, and having a good operating RTO is vital to achieve that. So that sort of ticks those boxes. And it's very clear at the moment that we are still in recovery mode in regard to the events that have taken place, not just with storm activity last year, but the 2 years prior with COVID, which turned things upside down. You have a look at visitor numbers. We still had quite a few people visiting us through COVID, but mainly local people rather than international visitors, and the international visitors now are starting to return very slowly, but are still impacting our economy by not being around. In reading the report, I'm very passionate about this particular topic, and have read this, and I've had several conversations with John at Destination Hauraki Coromandel. I have some questions in regard to the report that I'd like to understand. One of them is the destination management plan, which it indicates is not owned by Destination Hauraki Coromandel, but I'm not quite sure who actually owns it, and I wouldn't mind some comments around that. There were also some comments in the report around businesses that were supportive of the activities of DHC, and I'd be interested in some comments around that area as well. And then I might reserve a few more questions once I've had a response to that, if that's possible.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I think for those questions we'll throw to Steve. Steve, questions on the destination management, also possibly with the national context or the experience of other destination management plans?
Yes, so, sorry, can you hear me? Just making sure everyone can
We
hear.
can, Steve, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, destination management plans, including the one for Hauraki, Coromandel, are regional plans. So RTOs have a lead role in facilitating and developing those plans. But when you think of all the factors and elements that contribute to a high value visitor experience, they cover a much broader range of actors than the RTOs. So, roading and transport and connectivities and skills, etc. So for this reason, most destination management plans around the country are a collective responsibility for those agencies that contribute in a broad sense to destination management and marketing. And that includes combination of businesses, iwi, local government, central government agencies and beyond, depending on the actions in them. So they're very much normally regarded as a collective regional plan, even if the RTO is central to helping develop that. And we make the point in the report that, based on that, often those plans are guided by and have oversight by a collective group involving industry, iwi, local, central government, and other key stakeholders. Now that didn't happen in this case, but there's an opportunity to, put that in place. I guess your second question, which was about businesses supportive of DHC, within the confines of what we're asked to do and the small number of stakeholders and businesses we talk to, yes, in particular in relation to destination management, most of the businesses we talked to said, yes, the core role of an RTO is to attract visitors, to be that, national and international promoter of the, attractions and features of the region. But those that were involved in destination management activities, which particularly we're focused on how do we develop higher value products, higher value tourism spending, and how do we get some of those sustainability credentials in place that are increasingly demanded, particularly by international tourists. They saw that as having real value. So we didn't hear a lot of criticisms, if that was the sort of question around businesses. It was actually really positive feedback from those we spoke to.
I think that there is a relevant recommendation, though, as part of the suite of recommendations around giving that DMP a refresh and having a industry as part of a leadership group or an advisory group that take a look at the DMP again and manage it for going forward. That's right, Steve.
Yeah. So the major critique of it wasn't that it wasn't a bad thing to do, but there was so many actions in it that it's pretty important to focus on those that are going to have the highest impact. And there's an opportunity now to run a process that involves the key stakeholders to really focus on 3, 4, 5 things over the next 18 months that are really going to make the biggest difference.
Thanks, Stephen. I've got a question from Peter and then Robin, please.
Thanks, Liam. Jessica, thanks for the report and for your summary. Well done. When we were being interviewed by Martin Jenkins, I think I would like to think a strong message came through to that there was general dissatisfaction from us as councillors. In this report, and I'm happy to support the recommendation of enhanced BAU. Based on my understanding, which I'm asking for you to confirm, please. Firstly, that there is going to be an increase in the board governing district DHC's activity. So a strengthening of the board from 3 to 5 members, which I will assume will ensure that there is strong accountability and adequate representation from the key stakeholders in this. And I think that's a good move. Secondly, that as I read the report, it flags that things have to change, and that one of those key things is the relationship between DHC and the council and the staff is significantly strengthened and regularised, and with some strong accountabilities. That's what I'm inferring from that. And the third thing is that I'm making an assumption that the operational people at DHC have got the message that there is a change that's about to take place, and that through this that they have read the report and have got the message that we have a different expectation around Destination Hauraki Coromandel. So that's the first part of my question. And have I got all that right?
I'll try and answer them in the 3 sections. Maybe just starting with the have Destination Hauraki Coromandel on board, like staffing, operational level. There's actually a few recommendations that are in this report, or this part of this review, that DHC had sort of flagged themselves, knowing that there are some improvements to be made around accountability, operations, and we have had conversations. This report has also been shared with them, and Martin Jenkins did a fantastic session with both Hauraki District Council staff, so equivalents at Hauraki, and with Destination Hauraki Coromandel with the board and staff on the review findings. So again, broad support, and know that there's some changes that need to be made. The first point around the governance, yes, the review, and we support increasing the number of board members to 5. That would also need to be agreed with Hauraki District Council, and the implications of that to be further fleshed out, but in general, broad support. And that would also look at, through that process, we'd look at the capacity and capability and the sector representation, all of those things that would enable us to have a good board with good governance experience and industry representation. So that, yes. And then the other one around accountability and operations and engagement. So we can see that the review has highlighted a lack of engagement around council level, and so on a general day-to-day staff basis, we have a fantastic relationship with DHC, and having only been at council for a few months now, or maybe a little bit longer, but not too long, I can see also that the engagement with reporting and processes that we have at a staffing level, for those discussions to be brought through to council level, and that governance level engagement and collaboration around priority setting, expectations, accountability, absolutely, that can be strengthened.
Okay. So thank you for that. And just to add as well, jointly with Hauraki District Council as well, between the trust and the 2 councils collaboratively.
Yeah. So thank you. And then the supplementary question relates to the point that Martin brought up. If we approve the recommendation, enhance BAU, are we running a risk that this all could be in vain because Hauraki District Council suddenly take a different view, change their view about how much funding they're prepared to do, don't support the fact that the board has increased, etc., and we're left holding what would be a crying baby?
I can see Aileen might like to speak to that.
I was going to give a bureaucrat answer that technically yes, but reality is probably not. So I've had conversations with Langley and about what this might look like going forward, and he's fully on board with it. Does that reflect his council? Probably. So I guess nothing's certain in this world, but our view is that we seem to be aligned.
Thanks, Aileen. Robin, please.
There's a bit of preamble, then the question. And so, as I think most of the councillors are aware, the Chief Executive, the Mayor, Dali and myself attended a local government in New Zealand combined sector meeting a fortnight ago. And one of the guest speakers was Matt Ducey, the Minister for Tourism, and his talk was essentially stressing the importance of the destination management plans. And I've written down a quote here. He said that the DMPs are communities deciding what they need and who they want as tourists. And then he said the coalition wants localism and the devolution in the space. So they are stressing that destination management plans are a really important part of how they want to deal with councils going forward, and so we obviously need to have a really important say in that. So in terms of when we endorsed the destination management plan, my understanding of that was that we were endorsing a document which is going to become a living document and added to as things change. And certainly, yeah, Stephen is nodding his head, which is excellent. And just to your point, Peter, Langley and Toby were both in the room for those conversations, and there was much chatter around all of the councils afterwards about the importance that the Minister for Tourism is putting on this destination management plans. So with that, we just hit 600 parts per million of CO2 in this room, so very time to get some ventilation. So my point being that I'm really happy to endorse the enhanced status quo, because this is a really important relationship, and I believe, if I could speak for the politicians south of our river, that everybody's hearing that it's a really important relationship. I really approve and cannot endorse enough the enhanced status quo, because I feel like there have been failings potentially on both sides of the relationship in terms of how we've been communicating with them and how they've been communicating with us. And I think having a partner that is experienced and has connections throughout the industry is a really solid way for us to go forward. So can only endorse, and there's no question, sorry.
Thank you, Robin. Yeah, and thank you for the reminder about Matt Ducey's comments. Yes, I was there, and I think they are extremely pertinent. John Morrissey, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. We got this report because there was general dissatisfaction with Destination Hauraki, Coromandel, and what was being delivered and what was coming back to us. So we got the report done, and it's a good report, thank you. It was worthwhile reading. However, I strongly feel that we're funding to the tune of about $500,000 per year this organisation. I didn't expect a report to come back with increased funding implications for what I think is already a well-funded organisation. I myself believe that the status quo is where I land on this. I think that we're making financial decisions at this table that we haven't actually allowed for in the long-term plan, and we do it piece by piece and inflict further rate increases on our ratepayers. I'll go back to what I said. I believe it's a well-funded organisation at the moment. I don't believe that we'll get a better service as a result of having 5 on the board instead of 3. I see more expense. So I will actually, I'll stand here and I'll move option 4 if I have a seconder, which is the status quo, then it flies. And if it doesn't get a seconder, then I fail. So I'm moving option 4, status quo.
Thank you, John. Mitch, did you want to respond to that?
I have a seconder.
Just a question, because there are quite a few recommendations that don't cost anything as well. And so one of the options in the report is to go with the endorsed status quo in part, and councillors have the opportunity to vary, modify some of the recommendations, and also to note just that the cost, and Jess could probably help me out here, but the cost, while we've flagged that there might be some cost consequences, they haven't been determined, and
it's scary.
Yeah. So at the moment, the cost for the governance, for the annual cost for the governance of DHC is about $30,000.
33.
Yeah, and so we could come back to council with some greater clarity around the cost of that, if that was going to help with the decision making.
Thank you, Mitch.
So before we go forward, just out of respect for Councillor Morrissey, he has put a motion on the table to go with option 4. If there is a seconder, we need to move forward on that. If there is not, then it will lapse. Is there a seconder for that option 4? There being none, thank you, Councillor Morrissey.
Thank you.
We'll move on. Thank you. Delly, please.
So I actually agree with some of the points that Councillor Morrissey has raised, and being fiscally responsible in times of hardship, I'm just wondering whether an enhanced option 2, partially endorse and implement DHC review report without increasing the contribution that we currently make, I would feel more comfortable with that.
Why don't you move it?
John.
I'd second that.
Okay, so are you moving option 2?
I'm going to wait until my colleague makes his comments.
Okay.
I believe Rika moved it, Your Worship.
I seconded what Delly said, but if she's not moving it, then I don't know if I can second it.
Okay.
No, we're going to wait. Sorry. We're just going to, John's got some comments, so we're just going to hold fire for a sec.
It's not a comment as much as I know that we've got John with us in the room, and I would be really keen to hear from John in regard to his reading of the report and any comments that Destination Hauraki Coromandel, if that is okay with.
So John Sanford?
Yes.
Procedurally, can I invite John Sanford to make a contribution? Sorry, I've just got to get some governance clarity on this, please. I don't have a problem with it. Does anyone around the table have an issue with that?
And can I also just make sure that John doesn't have a problem with it?
Putting him on the spot.
I'm not trying to put him on the spot. I just think it would be really helpful from my perspective to get a Destination Hauraki Coromandel perspective on things as well.
So look, I'm comfortable with that. John, would you would like to extend an invitation? Are you comfortable with that? Just while John's coming up, I'm just going to add a couple of comments to what Robin pointed out earlier about Matt Ducey. And I think one of the things that we need to be mindful of is that there's a very, very clear direction coming from this current government about funding models. And there's a clear steer towards user pays, and the government is actively investigating. And I think Destination Hauraki Coromandel have a role to play in exploring alternative funding models which take the pressure off councils to carry the can in terms of the support and infrastructure and visitor infrastructure. So that is something that I see personally. I see Destination Hauraki Coromandel having a role in what that looks like and how that's implemented at ground level. So I don't know whether you want to make any comment on that, but we're certainly getting that that direction from the government, and that could go everything from visitor levies at the border through to bed taxes, through pay as you enter Cathedral Cove or whatever. It could be a whole mix of things, but we've certainly had that message. John.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. Probably better if I answer questions, but I just would say that I guess it was a challenge for us to have the review, but one of our mantras at Destination Hauraki Coromandel all the time is we say every day, how can we do better tomorrow what we did yesterday? So we're constantly looking to improve, and so part of that comes back to the paper that
we presented to the Mayor and Chief Executive of both HDC and TCDC and Lorna and Rebecca in their respective roles, which was, we'd spent some time last year figuring out, given that we'd been asked or funded by the government to develop a destination management plan, which we actually did in 21 and 22. But that, you know, we felt we needed to see whether the organisation was fit for purpose. And as you're aware, we presented a brief paper, but outlining that we felt that the organisation needed to be restructured to move into the future. But the other thing, and that was to have 5 board members rather than 3 for a number of reasons. But the other thing was that we'd made it clear to both our funding council, that we didn't expect that the funding for DMP activities should come from our territorial local authorities. And so, as Mayor Len has said, we've actively been engaged with Tourism New Zealand and the Minister, the new Minister and the previous Minister, in saying, well, you know, we need more money to do these things, or support doing these things, because it's not our job to do them. But if we're actually going to make progress, then we need funding to actually keep progressing the elements that are raised in the destination management plan. And so, as I say, we've made it clear to the councils that, you know, our core funding is for destination marketing, and we're happy to share with councillors, and we do want to share with councillors how we perform on a national level in that respect. But that money relating to destination management plans had to come from somewhere else.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Questions?
Martin has a question, and John, you might have a couple more questions.
So it's not so much a question, so we're just currently doing questions for John?
At the moment, yes.
I guess it, in reading the report, there's a lot of content in there in regard to it, and I'm sure it's probably had a lot of healthy discussion within your place, and I guess particularly by the current board of the. I'd be really interested in some of the observations, and are looking at very much from a positive point of view of the learnings that you're taking, and how that sort of you'd like to see applied going forward. I'd be really interested to hear some views around that.
Thank you. The recommendations are great, and because we've got this mantra, if you like, about how can we improve, then being externally reviewed, because sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and so that was where it was fantastic that we were able to be challenged by the Martin Jenkins team on our thinking on a range of subjects, and we obviously we're disappointed that our relationship with TCDC councillors had become fractured, and it wasn't any intention. It wasn't ever done deliberately. And in fact, we do pride ourselves on our transparency, almost to a fault sometimes, but we figure it's better to be absolutely open about what we're doing and where our concerns lie. And as Jessica said, we work very closely with the executive teams at both HDC and TCDC. And to Langley's surprise, I didn't know he didn't know this, but we actually invite to our board meetings. Each time we have a board meeting, we invite, Mitch usually comes from TCDC, and we invite person Rebecca, usually from HDC, to listen to what we're doing, and they have full disclosure of our minutes and agendas, our financial, everything is there for scrutiny. But it's the old story, you know, you can always improve things, and so we think that report is fantastic. And I was a little bit worried when you were saying that you were worried, Councillor, that when you're sort of the preamble saying, well, you're worried that some of these recommendations might die in the ditch, and I was going, no way. And then you said, because of what HDC might do. But so that relieved me, because I was thinking you were going to say that our team weren't going to take these on board. We're absolutely committed to that. And we've already got an appointment with Jessica next Monday, I think, isn't it, Jess? Yeah, so we can start going through what we need to do to meet the recommendations of the report. We've got no problem with any of the recommendations. You know, to us, they're really positive. And we've also, we're going to, and I can tell you one of the things that we've decided is that we're going to put on a half-day workshop for those councillors from both TCDC and HDC who would like to better understand what we do and why we do it and how we do it. And we'll do a presentation, but we're already planning that so that we can actually, you know, because it's no good if some people don't understand what we do, then that's our fault. And so we need to work harder on that, that's for sure. And that's what our plan is in the short term, is to make sure that we get those councillors who want to, they can come along and then pose every question they want. Because as I said, you know, to us, you know, sunlight's the best antiseptic. And so we're totally open.
Thanks, John. So I'm going to take a question from Terry, and then what I'm hearing is that the door's been open to identifying some of the issues, stronger relationships, and then I think we'll look at putting the resolutions. So, Terry, and then one from Martin, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Oh, yes, I just want to quickly say that a very comprehensive report. It was really valuable to read. And I think if you look at the two key things that we focus on in the Coromandel, one is the aquaculture and the other is tourism. You need to have a strong platform for overseas to come in. So I support what Destination Coromandel is doing, and I support most of these initiatives going forward. So I think it's a positive thing and something we should support totally. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Martin.
Yes, so I can make a general statement rather than a question at this point?
I would prefer questions.
Oh, sorry, okay. Well, but I just want to, when the questions are finished, can I make a general comment?
Go ahead now, and then we'll put the motion. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, I can't support options 3 and 4. And I'm a little bit concerned about option 2, because option 2 talks about enhancements made as councillors see fit, and that worries me that that doesn't give the certainty that option 1 enhanced does. And whether it's option 1 or 2, the report talks about looking at the arrangements about the trustees and the funding for that. I'm also hearing people saying, well, you know, as financially constrained times, I don't think this is the time to be either pulling back or not investing in DHC because it's also troubled times for the operators and the rest of the tourism industry in this area. I know in other LTPs around the country, there's some significant cutbacks in RTO funding, and that's creating a whole lot of worry amongst operators in those areas. So yeah, I would like to move that we put option 1 to the vote and see if we've got support for it.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor. Could I just make a brief comment about RTOs and the reason for their being, and it will be very brief, because you could say, like I used to be quite involved in forestry as well as tourism. And so people say, well, why should district councils, even the government, fund tourism activities? And the bottom line is that because there's market failure, our forestry companies are big enough and ugly enough, you know, now of a scale that they can actually operate on their own on the world stage. But because tourism worldwide is made up, I mean, I talk about the tapestry of tourism. So if the tapestry is made up of a couple of big hotel chains and airlines, they'd be pretty boring. But the tapestry of tourism is made up of B&Bs, horse trekkers, it's just a myriad of things. But that makes it really rich. But the problem is they tend to be small to medium enterprises, and they cannot do these things in isolate. None of them are big enough, by and large, to actually have any effect on a national scale or global scale. And so that's the reason for RTOs, is being able to collaborate and collect together the activities of the businesses that are involved in tourism. And funnily enough, tourism touches on just about every business in the region. And that's why Tourism New Zealand is funded by the government, because they can do the stuff on a global scale that if left for nothing to happen, and there's actually a fantastic case study in Colorado a few years ago. The Colorado state government pulled all their funding for their tourism, marketing and destination management activities, and it absolutely, just tourism absolutely dropped because everyone else was crowding in and promoting their place when Colorado was losing out. And so it's actually a really good case study of the demise and then the rebuild of Colorado. But just for those who are wondering why the hang of councils or local government, central government funding tourism activities. That's
thank you, John. So we'll ask you to take a seat back there if that's all right. Thank you. I do have, just before we come to Terry, I do have a motion on the table. Can you repeat that, please, Martin?
Oh, yeah, option 1.
Okay.
Which is pretty much what it says in the
So if we voted for option 1, that doesn't necessarily commit us to greater expenditure because we would still have to have that conversation. Okay, cool.
Yes, I can also confirm that.
For the chair, can we go to Terry? Just make sure he doesn't have any further questions.
Terry, please.
Sorry, Len, I've had my say, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Pop your hand down, Terry, if that's all right.
Len, in case you missed it, I was very happy to second.
I did hear that. Thank you. So I'm just looking at my rules and regulations in terms of if there is a motion proposed from the floor which is moved and seconded, what my obligations are in terms of acting on that. So can you give me any guidance on that?
Through the chair, you can put the motion.
Mm-hmm.
Can anybody speak to that
Am
motion?
I required to put the motion?
Yes, because it's not carried yet.
Okay, so the motion is to, and we've got all these recommendations, which is 1 through 4, but we've also got a motion for option 1. And I must admit to a tiny bit of confusion around the fact that these options are not identified in the recommendations.
Through the chair, could I just get some clarification from the staff, please? So as it currently stands with the recommendation that is in the report, we are looking at option 1. Okay.
So even though that's not
Option 1 is to endorse the recommendations of the Martin Jenkins review. And I'll just note as well is that there'll be an implementation plan. There has to be engagement with Hauraki District Council. Some of these things might happen quickly, others might take a little bit of time. We can come back to council with the implementation plan.
Okay, thank you. So without stating in item 3, for example, that it refers to option 1.
Yes.
That's what we're assuming. Does that need to be said in the recommendation? Does it need to be clearly stated that it refers to option 1? In which case, if it is, we can just move on and we can vote on essentially what we've got in front of us, which includes option 1. And I have a mover and a seconder already. Councillor Rodley, are you happy for that? So we go to page 177. We've got the recommendations 1 through 4, which essentially is voting in favour of option 1. Are you comfortable with that?
Through the chair, we'll just share our screen so that everyone is happy. So what we are suggesting is that we'll put the words approves option 1 on the recommendation 3.
Thank you. And I think that'll, and I appreciate your patience, that will just help to clarify that we're making the connection between these recommendations. Now, if we do that, I already have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations 1 through 4, which is Delhi and Peter. So what I would do in that case is ask Councillor Rodley to withdraw. No. Withdraw his motion.
I withdraw my motion.
We've got it covered. And are you happy for that, Robin? Okay, so we've got it covered in the recommendations. All right. So I have a mover and a second. Just who's that talking?
It's just here.
Okay. Terry, can you mute?
Yeah, he's good.
Sorry.
And Adi might like to clarify this, because there's a motion on the floor being moved and seconded. I think that we can now speak to that motion before you. Correct.
You can. Yep.
Oh, good. I'll try on the ditch. John, I appreciate your words up there, and I look forward to at some stage perhaps taking up your invitation. I'm not going to reiterate what I said before about my fiscal thoughts. They're pretty. I made that pretty clear. For any councillor that's around the table at the moment that also shares some of those concerns, I would support option 2 if option 1 should fail. So before you cast your vote, and if you do have some concerns about tying us in too tightly, option 2 does give us some latitude and the ability to look at the fiscal side of things a little bit more. So I'm not going to support option 1, but I would support option 2. So if there's any other councillors out there that are of a like mind, please join me. Thank you.
So we have a proposal from Councillor Morrissey, instead of including option 1, which I'm assuming would be part of item 3, that the council supports option 2.
You've got to go.
You've got to go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And if they don't get that in.
So far, we should only be receiving.
Microphones. Can't hear you.
Sorry, Rita.
Yeah.
What I just said is that my understanding is that we are just receiving, and then we should be putting option 1 to the vote and then option 2 to the vote.
Through the chair, we are looking at option 1. If option 1 fails, then there is an opportunity for Councillor Morrissey to move option 2 with a seconder. That is when we can consider option 2.
Okay. All right. So I have a mover and a seconder, which is Delhi and Peter, for items 1 through 4, which includes option 1. Right. Could I get a vote on that, please? All those in favour?
Aye.
All right. Those against? All right.
Me.
Rebecca? All right. Can we call a division on that, please, so we get the numbers?
Microphones.
I voted for. It's Gary.
Okay.
For Terry.
Give us a second, guys. We'll just get the numbers, please. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we've got 5 for and 4 against. The motion is carried for option 1. Thank you.
Lean's missing.
I don't need to vote if there is a 5-4. So I don't need to vote.
But you could make it a 5-5.
No, it's fairly common for the chair not to vote unless there's a need for the chair to vote. And we have a clear majority in favour of the recommendations in front of us, including option 1. Which I'm happy to do. So I'll vote for, as we've got option 1. I'll vote for. Okay.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, John Sanford. John Sanford. John, sorry, that's not appropriate. Sorry, you can't do that in the middle of a council meeting. Sorry, mate. Thank you. Okay, take a breath. Right, next item is item 2.8, council feedback to central government and Waikato Regional Council consultation process. Sian. What's the time? 25 past 11. Just a heads up that at 12 a.m. we're going to go to the Shoreline Management Plan Priortisation at 12 a.m. Oops. Thank you, John.
So we also have Stephen here if there's any questions on land transport GPS.
Great, thank you. 2, 3, 4. Okay, Sian, thank you. Leslie, thank you. Do you want to give us an update on where we're at with this? I'm assuming most councillors have read this. There's some fairly crunchy stuff in here. So over to you.
Sure, kia ora, Your Worship, elected members, excuse me. Just wanted to quickly cover off initially that there are kind of two parts to this report. The first part is for your endorsement of some feedback that staff provided on the government policy statement on land transport and the Waikato Regional Council land transport, regional land transport plan. So those are items of feedback that were already provided, and for transparency and democratic accountability, we wanted to record those in a council report for you to look at and endorse. So that's the sort of administrative part of the report, I guess. The second part, the more substantive part, is some recommended draft feedback that council staff have put together. Staff across the council have contributed to developing this draft feedback on the Waikato Regional Council's consultation document for its long-term plan. There are a couple of quite critical items in there, particularly in relation to the draft infrastructure strategy, which bears quite a lot of impact on Thames Coromandel District. Primarily, the Regional Council is seeking feedback on its proposals to increase and make some slight changes to the way it levies its rates on certain types of activities and for certain types of services that it provides. So staff are recommending that we do provide feedback in support of the Regional Council's proposals there, and also that we make some comments about the content of the infrastructure strategy. So that's in the draft feedback that is attached to the report. As I say, it is draft, it has been prepared by staff, it is brought to you here today for elected members to make their contributions, and the text that is in the draft feedback is open for amendment by elected members today. That's the point of bringing it to you. And we have a number of the subject matter experts that contributed the content to the draft feedback here or online. So any questions that elected members have about the detail of what's in there, I'm sure they'll be able to answer your questions.
Thank you, Sian. Leslie, anything to add at this point?
Kia ora, everyone. Nothing from me at this point, though. The only one thing would be that we need to get the feedback in by, I think, the 2nd of May. So not
2nd of May?
Yes,
okay, so
the consultation closes.
What I'd, sorry, before I come to you, John, what I'd like to suggest is that there's a couple of different things going on in here. And firstly, there's the feedback on the WRC LTP process, but there's also our submission on the GPS on land transport, which has basically already been submitted. So we are endorsing that in retrospect. So I'd like to suggest that we need to take that separately because it's done and dusted. I've read it. There's some good stuff in there, so well done. I would also like to call on Stephen Town and potentially Aileen, if you've got anything that you would like to add, just so we treat that separately from the WRC LTP stuff.
Yeah, just agreeing with you. So attachments A and B have already been circulated around councillors, and so this is just the retrospective sign off and getting it into the public arena step. So my suggestion is you just move that as a matter of procedure and just focus on attachment C.
Yeah, thank you. And there's nothing much we can do. I mean, it's some really good work in there. It's done. It's submitted because it was a deadline that came up before our council meeting. What I am wondering is if there's some updates now on what's happening in that space.
So as I responded to an earlier question, we've got a section 17A review later in the agenda. So it's my suggestion we discuss all the rating matters as part of that section 17A report.
Okay, so thank you. All right. So we'll look at, sorry, John, was there a question in relation to that, or was it the...
I was just going to move that that we accept option 1 and incorporate that both retrospectively as well as what is required to be endorsed going forward.
So option 1 on the recommendations on page 235 relate to the WRC LTP. I would like to keep that separate, please, from items 2, which is the items 2 and 3, which are the GPS on the land transport. Okay, so we can do that. So, John, if you're happy to move items 1 through 3, which is receiving the process, endorsing the feedback on the GPS, and which is items 2 and 3. You happy to move those 3? Thank you. Could I get a second, please? John Morrissey, all those in favour? Thank you. All right, so we move to item 4. Thanks, Ari. Move to item 4, which is the feedback on the LTP, attachment C. And this is the stuff that will need some discussion from councillors, please. Okay, so Xian, do you want to give us a little bit of an update on the work that you've done? And what I'm aware of is that the recommendations from our council differ from the recommendations that are put forward by the WRC's consultation document. In other words, their document goes through and says, we recommend this. We're taking a different approach. Can you just touch on those for us, please?
And only in relation to one of the draft pieces of feedback, our staff recommending that we not support the Regional Council's preferred option. So for the first 2 items, if we just, if members are looking at attachment C, which is the draft feedback.
Yeah.
So the first item, investing in the region's biodiversity, as I mentioned, that's a proposal to increase the rate that the Regional Council charges to therefore fund those activities. The Regional Council's preferred option is to do that, and we would be supporting that. So that's the first item. We also had indicated that it was a possibility that the Regional Council's funding for this type of work that it currently gets from central government, again, knowing that there are shifting priorities, we've yet to see central government's budget for this year. And so therefore, if the Regional Council decided that it needed to increase the rate further, which was in a separate option in the consultation document, we've indicated in our feedback that we would also support that as well if it got to that point and the Regional Council felt that it needed to actually increase the rate further. So there's sort of 2 parts to that one, both supporting what the Regional Council's preferred option is. The second item in relation to public transport, again, the option that the Regional Council has stated that it prefers in its consultation document, the 80-20 split, and the way that rating for public transport is obtained from properties across the region, is the one that that staff recommend. This council supports that option as well. The one where we are recommending, staff are recommending that we support a different option to the Regional Council's preferred, is in relation to item 3, the Regional Economic Development Funding. And my colleague Mitch can speak a bit more to this if elected members have some detailed questions on it. In essence, the Regional Council is proposing to discontinue the current Regional Development Fund. Monies that have accumulated within that budget, as it has existed up until now, will be redirected into Te Waka, which is the Regional Economic Development Agency. So both those things were proposed in the consultation document: disestablish the Regional Development Fund, continue to fund Te Waka with increased funding that's going to come from discontinuing the Regional Economic Development Fund. This district has benefited significantly from the Regional Development Fund for a number of significant projects. Just down the road, Kopu Marine Precinct being a good example of that. So therefore, staff are recommending that we not support the Regional Council's preferred option, that instead we ask for the option of continuing the Regional Development Fund to be the one that is adopted. In doing so, the options for Te Waka then sort of become a bit not quite relevant. So what we are recommending that we say about Te Waka is that we think regional economic development agencies are a good thing. We would like, to continue both the Regional Development Fund and Te Waka, but we do raise some concerns about the current way that Te Waka is operating. That is some comment that we picked up from elected members meeting that they had with the chair and other elected members of the Waikato Regional Council a couple of weeks ago. And so we picked up that there were some concerns that elected members had. So I hope that we have captured those in the draft feedback. But again, please, elected members, if you would like to contribute more words there. And again, I'm sure Mitch can help with some of the detail of that too.
Thanks, Sean. Mitch, anything to add?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll open this for discussion. So, Martin, did you have a question?
Yeah, just looking at 9.1 about the region's biodiversity, and you mentioned that we'd support one, but if the coalition government reduces its funding, then we look at option 2. So I think we currently pay, depending on your property value, I think it's $5.80. So just to clarify, that will go from $5.80 up to $8.68. So it's not an $8 increase. But yeah, I don't know what other people think, but I would support option 2 there because our biodiversity in this region is under an enormous amount of threat, and if we're then going to ask Regional Council to be involved in that for our region, then I think we need to indicate that we're willing to fund it or increase funding, ratepayers.
Can I just ask, WRC had 3 options in their proposal. One was $5.80, which was essentially maintaining the current level. The other one, the middle one, that they are recommending is supported was, I think, $8.30 or something, which is inflation adjusted. The third one was $15 per household. I've had feedback from people that I talk to that their preferred option, because there is so much trapping and biodiversity support in this district, that the $15 per household rated for across the district, across the region, sorry, would get a lot of support and would benefit our district, because we have a whole bunch of issues with biodiversity that other councils in the region don't have. That option isn't included here. Is there a reason why, and is there a reason why we can't go for option 3 instead of options 1 or 2?
So,
and I'd be interested to hear what councillors around the table think about
just
that.
to clarify, Your Worship, so the options in the Waikato Regional Council consultation document is numbered there. Option 1 is the increase to $8.68 per property. Option 2 is increased to $15 per property. Option 3 was no change.
Which is the $5.
So the Regional Council's preferred option is increased to $8.68. In the draft feedback, staff are recommending that we support that, but there's also an additional paragraph to say if the Regional Council decided that it actually wanted to go further, we would also support that as well. Absolutely, if elected members want to just simply support option 2, which is an increase to $15, that's what we can say in the feedback. It's up to elected members.
I'm interested to hear. Thank you, Sean. I'm interested to hear from councillors on that. Delhi.
Thank you. I think the work the staff has done on all of these submissions is incredible, and I did spend the time to read it very carefully, and I support completely what you've come up with. And I think option 1 is showing some of what Len was saying without putting too much burden on the people who are already suffering a little bit with their rates. So I think exactly what you've laid out here is what I would support.
Thanks, Delhi. Any other thoughts around the table? Robin?
I think you're right to point out that we really benefit from this fund. I can think of a number of places that are funded for pest control, including one group that is funded to do pest control on a council-owned reserve through this fund. And so I would be happy to support it as it is, but I would also be really happy to support option 2 as our preference, with option 1 as the backup. So just flip it around.
Thank you.
In fact, that would be really great, because I think our biodiversity needs a bit more help than it's getting. And the only other thing I thought about that is there an opportunity to mention, because it specifically talks about Kalupa, which is absolutely wonderful, but in terms of the pest and plant, because one of the things that I hear, or not every day, but most days, when particularly in some seasons, is that the amount of privet that's in Thames is outrageous. And we were told last term that it wasn't a pest that considered across the entire region. And having taken a trip to Raglan recently, I can absolutely attest that there is privet outside of our district. And so I just wonder if it's worth mentioning that specifically, to ask whether they could be considering a little bit more privet control, or at least have it on their list of species, because that's the problem at the moment, is it's not listed as their top 10.
Thank you, Robin. Delhi?
I think we also have, and I talk or what you're saying completely, that if we, through our long-term plan, if it doesn't get the support to raise that to $15 per household, we do have an opportunity to support environmental groups potentially through our discretionary funds. So if we have a particular problem in our ward, we could actually say, gosh, we want to put some money to a local organisation to get some of this mahi done.
That's exactly what's happened in Coromandel Culville, with a group that was previously funded through this fund to do predator control, and is now going through the discretionary fund.
Thank you. Thank you. Aileen.
Just so the last bullet point under 1, I see there actually is a resolution to allow the CE to do a little bit of tutuing with the document. But under that last bullet point, I also had in mind the fact that some of the reforms coming through central government are actually removing some of the regulatory protections for biodiversity. And I would just want to add something in there about the removal of regulatory protection, e.g. SNA, etc. Yes, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Into this, the wording of this?
Oh, bullet point.
Can you be more specific on which bullet point?
The last bullet point under number 1 on page 249.
249, the last bullet point there. So are you proposing that additional wording in there allowing Chief Executive to...
The resolution already provides for the Chief Executive to make minor amendments, but I'm just pointing out an amendment I'd be keen to make would be just to note that the removal of regulatory protections makes this activity more important. So if you remove regulatory protections, you're then relying on sort of optional enhancements to the environment.
So that then becomes part of the wording for our submission?
That's right.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Yep, everyone else happy with that? Sian, Leslie, you happy to take that on board?
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Eileen. Okay. So if we go to the next item, which is public transport, which is the proposal for option 1, the recommended option, which is the 5-kilometre bus route and the 80-20 split. And the comment is that that provides significantly more flexibility than the other proposal, which is quite defined, I think, and locks out all flexibility, was my reading of it. Any thoughts and comments on this? Option 1 is the proposed recommendation. My reading of that is that it allows flexibility, and there is quite a lot of support for district-wide funding of public transport. It's not universal. And I've had discussions with a couple of other councils in the region who are not particularly happy to support it in its current format, but that's really basically because they need to have continuing conversations around the transport routes that are being proposed, and they're not working for them. I think once they've had those discussions, that there is going to be fairly good, strong support around the region for region-wide support of public transport, which is what we're being asked to do here, to support that region-wide model as opposed to community board by community board, which is the way it's been done in the past. Okay. Going to, sorry, Peter, did you have a question? No? Okay. They're going to regional economic development funding. Then obviously there are implications for us in this, as Sian's already explained. Essentially what WRC are proposing in their LTP is that they disestablish the Regional Development Fund. We have benefited, as Sian said. I think we got $500,000 for Kopu. They supported us, that fund supported us on Sugarloaf. The fund has struggled to find homes for the money. And I think we are one of only 2 councils which have been recipients of that fund, that's my understanding. If it was disestablished, it would close the door for us to apply to that fund again. If the money goes to Te Waka, then we have to make sure that the relationship with Te Waka works for us as a council. And Te Waka is very small. It's very lean. I think there's only 3 or 4 staff in there. And in the past, I think we have struggled to have a good, strong relationship with Te Waka, because they've got a tendency to be more central Waikato focused and focused on specific areas that they work in and their specific projects they work in. And I think they do a good job on those, but we haven't really seen a particular level of engagement with Te Waka that I think would make me happy at the moment. So that relationship would need to be worked on and developed if that fund is closed down and that money goes to Te Waka. So there would need to be some work done there, and at the moment where it's sitting, I'm not particularly encouraged by it. So I'm keen to hear from councillors as to whether we support the proposal that our submission is that the Economic Development Fund is retained, not disestablished. Any thoughts around the table, Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Len. So just if we take the Kupu Marine Precinct development, we applied to WRC for funding from the development grant, and they've granted us. If that fund didn't exist and we were in that same situation, would we be applying to Te Waka for funding, or would we be expecting Te Waka to be saying, Kupu is part of our strategic direction and therefore we provide, I mean, how would that be working if the fund didn't exist?
So that's a really good question, and I personally haven't seen anything to say that if the money goes to Te Waka, then Te Waka then opens up a fund which is available for councils to apply to. I have not seen that. Now, somebody might be able to correct me, but I'm not convinced that that then opens up a fund that is available to us.
Okay. So in which case, I think we need to be, excuse me, really strong on ensuring that our submission is really strong around retaining the development, economic development funding. We are, we are a unique area. We're a unique area even within the Waikato. We have so much coastline, and we're so diverse, and we spend our time working on plans and strategies for things that do end up being unique to our area, and to therefore be able to have a place where we can apply for funding, like we did with the Corporate Marine Development, which was, right at the, it's helped us got that thing over the line. I think it's absolutely critical. So I'm not saying this is not strong, but it needs to be really strong in terms of the importance for us of being able to access funds for things that relate to our unique economic development.
Thank you, Peter. Rich, did you have a comment around, and if anyone can answer the question about whether if it goes to Te Waka, is there a proposal that it then makes a fund available for councils to apply to, or is that door closed?
No, I haven't seen any information that would indicate that. And the regional council previously provided operational funding for Te Waka, and the way I read their draft proposal is that the funds that were in the Regional Economic Development Fund be used for the operational funding of Te Waka. And Aileen.
Additional point to that, my understanding is a number of councils are intending to pull out of funding Te Waka, so it might just be a substitution.
So at the moment, my understanding is WRC fund Te Waka to the tune of around 750k a year. Other territorial authorities' funding levels are a lot smaller, and ours probably in the region of 30k. If Te Waka is no longer funded 750 a year by WRC, then it makes our contribution kind of irrelevant, because it's arguable that Te Waka probably wouldn't be able to continue to operate without that WRC funding. So if this fund is disestablished and that money goes to Te Waka, then almost certainly my reading is that it would become operational funding for Te Waka, not a fund that's available for councils to apply to, which comes back to what Peter said, and it really reiterates the importance of us, I think, making a strong submission in support of retaining that fund. That would be my reading of it. Thanks, team. Okay. If there's no further discussion on the economic development funding, can we look at infrastructure strategy and flood protection, please? Sian, was there any comments or any further information around that? Amon?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, my colleague Amon is the primary contributor
Thank you.
to this draft text. But essentially, as I said in my introduction, this is obviously a very critical aspect of the long-term plan that the Waikato Regional Council will eventually adopt. The infrastructure strategy per se was not a matter that was specifically consulted on, but it was published. The draft of the infrastructure strategy was published as a supporting document to the consultation document, which is why we were able to have a look at it. And there are some concerns that staff have highlighted here, and Amon can certainly answer any questions that elected members might have about the degree of commitment that the Waikato Regional Council has, particularly towards the flood protection schemes that are critical to this district. And so the draft feedback is raising that as a concern and seeking for the Regional Council to provide greater certainty about its commitment. There are levels of detail, obviously, in the infrastructure strategy where it gets down to information about certain schemes. Staff at this stage thought we would keep the draft feedback reasonably high level because there will be opportunities, obviously, for discussions at the staff level on these things in the future as well. But any specific detailed questions, Amon, I'm sure, will be able to answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. Amon?
Kia ora. Thanks, Sharon. That's a really good intro. Maybe I'll just run you really quickly through some of the points. So in Appendix C, there's 4.1. That one's really highlighting that there isn't any clarity with what Waikato Regional Council is saying. I think in the document they say do something different. We're not sure what doing different is. Where there's infrastructure like protection at Kopu, we need to continue with our planning. There's consenting requirements, and so we are making a statement that we assume that that protection will be maintained for the foreseeable future. So that's because we haven't got any advice to the contrary thus far. That's probably the first one.
So are we hearing that there is a lack of clarity around what infrastructure they are proposing to invest in it, but are we hearing that things have changed, or things have changed in a way that leaves us in the dark about what they're proposing or what they're going to be doing? Or I guess I'm a bit confused.
Yeah, from my perspective, thinking back 3 years ago, there was an allocation of financial funds to adapt to climate change.
In the LTP?
In the LTP and in the infrastructure strategy, and now that's less clear, and it's more of a signal to say we will not be able to adapt to climate change. So potentially reducing protection, reducing the level of service.
Which has significant implications for us. Please.
But I think this is the dawning of the realisation that we can't kind of build our way out of climate change. And we touched on this when we talked about or can I talk about that? In a workshop recently, we did discuss some liability issues and the interplay between the level of protection provided by the stop banking, the requirements of the Resource Management Act to have 100-year planning horizons before you can develop, and the provisions in the Building Act to have 50-year floor levels, when you don't know that your stop banking is going to go beyond the next 10 years in terms of providing those levels of protection. So there's different acts of parliament that kind of operate together at place. That it's beginning to dawn on the country that going forward we can't keep building up with stop banks, so that we begin to start to have conversations about where are we going to do this and pay for it, and where are we going to retreat. So all of this kind of hangs together, and this is the first signal, I guess, from the Regional Council that stop banks just can't go up forever and a day. So we're just pointing out the issues that creates, and this is going to be a very big issue for New Zealand going forward.
Thanks, Aileen. That's a really, really good summary, a really good analysis, and it's quite sobering. I guess where it leaves us as a council is, what do we put in our submission that talks to that? And so I'm interested to hear from your team, and Aileen, whatever your thoughts might be in terms of how we would address that in a submission, if we can. I mean, what level of detail can we get down to if there is no detail coming back from WIC?
So through the mayor, I'll just maybe move to 4.2, where we're suggesting that they do adaptive planning to provide that greater certainty. So at the moment, they're not saying we're withdrawing or we're not able to. There's just not clarity, and there hasn't been the work done to set that direction or give us confidence on what will happen in the long term. So that's the point of 4.2, to both do the adaptive planning, and secondary to that is signalling there could be additional costs for managing their future infrastructure flood protection that aren't allowed for yet.
Is there an element of wait and see here in terms of legislation coming through from the central government, which of course the timing is appalling in terms of people trying to put LTPs together?
Yep, so that's quite a difficult question. Yes, there is a gap in terms of the guidance around climate change. There's also gaps around how these things are going to be funded and what the cost sharing arrangements might be going forward. And those work streams that Minister Shaw began in the last electoral cycle, some climate change work that was starting to address those really difficult points, and we made a submission just before the last election, or just over the election period, wasn't it, around feeding back into that. And my understanding is this current government will be picking that work up, but this isn't something that is going to be fixed in short term. This is going to be an ongoing long-term conversation that council is going to need to be involved in, because it's going to be big.
Yes, yep. Thank you. Dilly, did you have a...
I actually think what staff have got in 4.2 covers it, with the knowledge that you've got currently to work on, and knowing that other legislation may come down the track. I read 4.1 and 4.2 and thought you'd done a really good job. So I tautoko that work.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and a good job in a difficult and challenging and uncertain environment is what I would add. So thank you, Dylan. Martin?
Yeah, and I think in that, under that 9 preferred option, page 241, it talks about sending a copy of the council's report on prioritisations to them. So that's not just saying, hey, we're going to need some money. It's actually, hey, here's our plan, here's our priorities. We're not going to do the whole 400 k's of coastline, but here's our priorities. We've actually worked on this. We've got a plan. Yeah, which is really vital.
Thank you. Right, we'll need to move on. So if we go to page 235, please, team, and we look at the recommendations. We have items 1 through 3, which have already been covered. We're looking at item 4 and item 5. We'll take those together. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Martin and Robin, all those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you, Sian. Thank you, Leslie.
Can I just ask a question? Are we going to have the opportunity to speak to these submissions? Is there the opportunity for us to do that?
The Regional Council is making available an opportunity. The staff recommended that we didn't need to take up that opportunity because we've covered everything that we think is important in the written feedback. But that's just staff recommendation. Elected members are free to.
So I'd like to make a
recommendation
that we do submit, because there's some absolutely critical ones in there, the biodiversity one, the thing about the regional funding matters I think are really important, and then the stuff we've just talked about there. But I mean, they're touch points for our district, and I think eyeballing the people and letting them know that we really think this is important just adds to the submission. So I'd like to recommend that we
I absolutely agree, Peter.
I would support that, and I would nominate Councillor Rebel to.
For elected members' information, the scheduled date for verbal presentations is the 14th to the 17th of May. So that would be the date, and certainly we can change that. Do you want to make a resolution about that?
Do we need a resolution? I would support it, and we've got. Do we need a resolution? No, just do it. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thanks, team. We are going to try and get a couple more items knocked over before lunch. We're doing okay for time, as long as we stay on track. We'll go to item 2.9, out-of-cycle budget request for Wyuna Bay, Coromandel. And welcome, Ed. Thank you.
Good afternoon. If I can take the report as read, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Ed. Questions? Councillor Morrissey?
Well, I guess the first thing is Ed's given us a couple of options in this paper, and one is, are we looking at this as an SMP issue, or are we looking at it as storm damage? And to my way of thinking, and correct me if those are the options you've given us as to whether we want to implement the SMP policy at this point. Ed.
That's correct, yes. Basically, we have a retaining wall that is storm damaged. The simple response is we can choose to repair the wall, or we can choose to not repair the wall and accept the fact that we're retreating from this site.
Right, and the issue with not repairing the wall and retreating from this site is, good to see you here, is the fact that that trigger probably wasn't going to be hit until about 40 odd years away. Amon, is that right? The SMP along that bit of Coromandel?
This trigger is 0.4 metres of sea level rise, so probably, yeah.
About 40 years. So I'll just signal this to councillors. I don't think it's appropriate that we start implementing the SMP in this manner for this sort of work, when in all reality it is storm damage, and we don't want to be retreating 40 years ahead of time, because that has huge implications for our communities. So I think we just need to take the SMP aspect out of this altogether at this stage. It's not an SMP retreat issue yet. So moving on, maybe other councillors might like to comment on that.
Thank you. Peter?
Can I just wait until see this comment on what John was saying? I think you raised a really good point, which I hadn't thought about the implications of activating a SMP trigger decades ahead of when what's in the SMP.
So I guess the question then that arises, this is storm damage, and if we look at the other end of Wyuna Bay, and I sent you the photo Z about the turning circle which has collapsed, can that be addressed under recovery so that we're not triggering SMP? Is there another umbrella under which to address not just the car park but also the collapsed road at the other end of the strip there?
The collapsed road at the other end is already covered under the recovery plan with budgets approved. Because that is a roading asset, That is 71% co-funded by NZTA under the recovery.
That's good news. And the car park would not qualify for the FAR, obviously, because it's a car park. It's not a roading asset. Is there something that we can, as a council, cover that, to fix that, which is not SMP? Is that an option? That's really what Councillor Morrissey's asking.
The only way that I'm aware to cover that is through the out-of-cycle budget request that I've submitted. We do not have specific funding for shoreline management repairs, and we don't have a specific policy that I'm aware of on actually what coastal defences, if you like, council manages and will either repair or construct in the future.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, Mia. That's where I was heading to eventually once we got the SMP thing cleared up. So, Ed, we're going to repair the cul-de-sac, which is now completely undermined and is part of the road. That's going to happen. When is that work programmed in, Ed?
The work is programmed for next financial year. At the moment, we're waiting for the Waikato Regional Council consents for that work to be provided. Because it's a cul-de-sac and serving a limited number of properties, it is a low priority for us. We have other roads that we are still repairing from the storms. But the anticipation is that we will get the required consents in August, September, and start work in October.
Okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying. There is a low traffic volume down there. There's not a lot of houses serviced, but it attracts a lot of visitors over the summer period, and it's not just local residents that utilise that road and that road reserve. I was thinking it would be possibly, and this is very operational, possibly cheaper to try and combine both projects together.
We've already looked at that option, and we've actually phrased our resource consent to the Regional Council with that in mind, so that the consent that we get will potentially cover both sites.
I'm very happy with your answers, Ed. That's great. I'm happy to move the recommendation out of cycle budget, but you want to say something first, do you, Peter?
So let me begin by saying I'm not a roading engineer, and in reading the report, I was attracted to the photo, and I guess I'm just gobsmacked that we're perhaps being asked to stump up with $200,000 to protect a couple of car parks. And I sit there and I think there has to be a less expensive option.
We have looked at all the other options that are available for us. When we're designing for this type of work, we do look at the effects of the sea on such things. This would be a coastal structure. I have to say that the structure that was there previously would probably not have met the required standards, which is why it's no longer there. If we're going to build something there, we're going to build something that will stay there and hopefully give us at least 20, 25 years life. That's the intention, and that's why we have the cost. We could do it cheaper, but the likelihood is if we do it cheaper, we will lose that asset again and have to replace it again.
And if I could just comment on that, if it requires a coastal permit, it'll be required to be properly engineered.
Thanks, Aileen.
Can I ask Councillor Morrissey, what's the implications if we don't do it?
Yeah, I was just going to do that, Pete. So yeah, you're right. It's a car park and appears of little value, really. It's just a car park. But Pete, what happened down the other end with the cul-de-sac is there used to be quite a good bit of protection there, and the road was nowhere near the sea. So if we don't repair the seawall, we're going to lose the car park. We will actually getting very close to the road as well. So some dollars spent here will actually protect the road, and instead of waiting for it to collapse like we have down the other end, where the cost is now going to be a lot higher to repair it, we'll have put some protection in place beforehand.
It does beg the question, when you know something is in an imminent danger of collapsing, whether the option of getting in advance and saying, well, look, we've got to do some interim mediation to stop this, because if we don't, the cost of repairing it and the consents and all the other implications are going to be significantly higher. It sounds to me like council's hands are tied, and we simply don't have that option apart from sitting there watching it happen, waiting for the road to fall into the sea, and then dealing with the significantly higher costs than if we took some interim remediation to avoid those costs building and growing and growing. Is that a fair assessment, Ed, or are our hands tied in those situations?
Certainly from the roading budget, yes, our hands are tied. Because NZTA is the primary funder, they will not fund preemptive works to protect roading assets. Council may choose to do funding outside of that, which would be not far supported, to create coastal defences, but that would be a council policy decision.
So I might suggest that that's something that on a policy level we need to have a look at, because there will be situations where we can look at something and say, look, if we take steps 1 and 2, we can prevent this from happening now, and avoid all these additional costs further down the road.
So in 1995, I wrote a letter to NZTA pointing out that coastal roads were going to fail through the Eastern Bay of Plenty. And over the course of about 7 years, they wrote back to me saying, well, we're not going to fund anything until it actually falls in. And so this issue is not a new one, and we're not the first agency to deal with it, and we're certainly not the first agency to harass them about it. I did harass them at length, and I did finally get some action, but it was a one-off, and I've not seen that repeated.
Thanks, Aileen, and that helps to put some context on it. I can tell you that because this is a road that is far funded, I'll be taking those photographs of the cul-de-sac and putting them in front of David Spears, and asking him for some common sense input into this, because this could have been prevented. And I'm not talking about the car park now on the resolution, I'm talking about the other end, where it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and it didn't need to. Now, if that's something that needs to be raised with the Waikato Tahi in terms of their preventive maintenance, if that's the discussion that we've had around the table, I'm happy to do it, and I'll be doing it at the next available meeting, because that's the questions that we're going to ask by the locals. If you guys can see this happening, why wasn't something done to stop it from falling into the sea? Why do we just stand there and wait? And I'm not having a go at you, Ed. I'm saying that if we need to take this up with Waikato Tahi in terms of the policy on preventive maintenance, I'm happy to do it, and I'll be doing it at the next meeting. So thank you. I'm going to ask for a move and a seconder, please, for the resolution in front of us. Councillor Morrissey, you happy to move it?
I've moved it, thanks.
Can I get a seconder?
Through the chair, just to know, there's 2 options. So which option would you like?
I want the good one. Hang on, I haven't got it in
Councillor
front of me.
Morrissey.
I've just gone away from that page.
Option
So
B.
Option B is retain.
Oh, yeah, option
B.
I'm happy to.
Option 2.
Option 2B.
Well, resolve either to adopt option 1 or
option
option 2.
two,
Resolution A or resolution B.
Yeah.
So
It's B, isn't it?
it's B.
Yes, B.
Yes.
Motion on the table is to resolves to adopt either we get rid of option 1 and we adopt option 2. That's the motion on the
Councillor
table.
Morrissey is receiving the report and is resolving to adopt resolution B, option 2, repair of retaining wall, and choosing to fund the repairs from the coastal retaining wall at an estimated cost of 200,000. That is what he's moving, and
That's
I'm
my understanding.
Yep.
We're all clear on that?
Yep.
Can I get a seconder, please? Robin, all those in favour? What's that noise coming down the line? Is that you, Rekha?
It's me, sorry, with children. I'm turning.
Oh, you want to vote, Terry, please?
I actually vote not to. I go to option 1, so I vote against this one. Sorry. This is setting a precedent for the future. Sorry.
So, Terry, to be clear, you are voting the managed retreat option and all that implies.
He's voted, it's
Not supporting.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. Now, he did specifically mention option 1. So, all right. So, can we just be clear on the numbers, please? All those in favour, option 2? 1, 2, 3.
I'm abstaining. It's a really a mixed problem. It really concerns me the way government departments and other ones just don't face reality. Yeah, you better take those photos, Len, and show them.
So that's kind of a separate issue. This one here is for council.
Yeah,
areas.
okay. I agree, but it still seems a nonsense, and that's why I'm abstaining.
So Gary's going to abstain. Terry?
I'm voting against because I'd rather option 1.
All right. Peter?
No.
Okay. Telly? Yes, thank you. John? All right. Can we get numbers, please? Rekha? Are you still away? Rekha had gone away. All right. If Rekha is not back, I might see if we can defer this because this is important. We've got to get a clear resolution on this work. Otherwise, it stays as it is.
We've got 4.
Okay.
And we've got an abstention and 3 no's.
Right. Okay. And I'll vote in favour of it. All right. Thank you.
She had noted that she would be away.
Okay. All right. And I will support it. So the motion is carried.
But I just say to councillors, there's a bigger question in there. It's not just about the car park. It's about when we're going to implement the shoreline management plan, and he's asked for some guidance on that. I believe this is an appropriate place when the SMP should be brought into play, or we just not ready for that yet.
On that argument, I actually support you. I don't see this as a shoreline management. I just see this purely as a financial decision around spending 200,000 to support a car park.
So. And I think it's a good point. But yeah, thank you. It's probably not something that we're going to discuss in more detail now, but councillors do have concerns about the connection between. Yeah, okay. So, right, thank you. Thank you, Ed. That's carried. How are we going for time? We've gone 2 hours, and I think understanding was we've got to call a break.
Well, we haven't gone 2 hours. Technically, we go 2 hours and then a couple of more minutes. 10:33 we came back. So it's up to you if you want to do this item. I think that it should be okay.
Hayden, we'll try and do your item now, and then we will break for lunch. Thank you.
Okay.
2.1. Over to you, mate. Thank you.
I'll take the report as read. Some of the highlights for this budget revision. So basically, we try and do at least 2 budget revisions a year, if not 3. And really what we're trying to do is get our closing position for the 23-24 financial year. So we're really focused on that. And it's really important in an LTP year where you've got wherever you finish affects your opening balances, how you start the next financial year. So we want to really flag any sort of issues that might be sort of coming in by doing a revision, working closely with the organisation on where they think they're going to finish. It gives us a good idea, and it allows us to sort of flag some of the issues that we may have. And in this instance, whenever with the annual plan, we've got a number of sort of timing and phasing issues. With the reforecast, we're able to sort of forecast, especially in the CapEx area, around how the sort of capital program is sort of tracking. So we're able to, for instance, tie capital subsidy revenue to basically how we're tracking in terms of our CapEx delivery. Basically that's sort of the main overview of why we do the revision. Probably the biggest area at the moment, just to keep an eye on, is the solid waste revenue, and Mo and his team are still sort of working with the contractor that we have just to make sure that we've got accurate data in terms of those revenues. So, right to you, Mo.
If I may please jump in there, Mayor and Councillors, there will be a report coming to Council in May on solid waste revenue and way forward.
Thanks, Mo. Look forward to that. So,
but yeah, happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Thanks, Hayden. Any questions of Hayden on this, Peter?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a question, but and it's absolutely no criticism.
Yeah.
But I find it intensely frustrating to be looking at a budget review based on 31st of December, and tomorrow is the 1st of May. And I kind of think, and 2 months after that is the end of the financial year, and it gives no opportunity to identify remedial actions that we might need to take based on whatever the information is that we have on the 31st of December. So it's not a criticism, it's not a question, but it's intensely frustrating to be looking at a significant budget revision 2 months before the end of the financial year.
Yeah, fair point. We obviously with the LTP, we've obviously got competing priorities, but with this December revision, while we were doing the revision, we were taking into account January results and adjusting the reforecast accordingly. So we, whilst it is based on December, we definitely took into account the extra months that we had, and we will be looking to do another reforecast in May to basically make sure we've got our final points. But fair point.
Thank you, Hayden. Tilly.
I'm happy to move that we accept this without further ado. Thanks, Hayden.
Thanks, Tilly. Can I just flag something for councillors, that an item that is coming to the Waikato Mayoral Forum on the agenda is the discussion around audit office involvement in LTPs and audit office fees. Obviously creates a lot of churn for our council and every other council, but one of the proposals that is on the table is that do LTPs need to be audited? And it's a discussion that all councils, I think, are starting to have. And Aileen, you can probably confess to some frustrations and some angst around the engagement of audit office in our LTP process, and we're not the only ones. So
I've got my hand for a question. I've had it up. Can I ask a question, Hayden? I can't quite follow. Swimming pool, you've got accessibility lifter, 40 million. What's accessibility lifter? I've not heard that term before. Page 263 at the top.
Gary, that's 40,000.
Oh, it's only 40,000. No, I couldn't understand. But what does accessibility lifter mean? Oh, they're nice to get people in and out of the pool. I'm with it. I've talked myself. Yeah. Okay. Yes, thank you.
All right, so the motion is to, in front of it, receive and approve. Delly's moved it. Seconder, please. Martin, all those in favour? Aye. Thank you. Carried.
Then, just if I can ask this question, I'm wondering if we're not starving hungry, how this will affect Amon's day if we defer him until after we've had lunch. Would it be more appropriate to have that update and we defer lunch for a few minutes?
Good question. I guess it depends on how much content there is. Where is he? There he is.
That's the item that's already been to the government's already, so it's kind of more information. Yeah, it's pretty clear.
Okay, I'm happy to take it if the councillors are happy to do that. Yep. Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you for the flexibility. So the SNP prioritisation work ran for about a year, had a co-governance approach with TCDC and WRC. This is the output from that work in terms of prioritisation. Highlighting Thames is right at the top, and we've already started doing that planning work. And just wanted to highlight two other things. There's overarching or enabling work in there, and one's around funding, so that's really important, and the other one's around planning, either to enable growth or to prevent inappropriate growth. So those are a couple of challenging areas for us, but this is the same report that went to the SNP prioritisation governance, but it hasn't been to council.
Can I ask a question?
Please do. Sorry.
So, Amon, are we getting any whiff at all of external funding towards these things? Anything? I mean, we've made an assumption in the LTP that there's going to be 60% funding or 40% funding or whatever that was. Are we getting any indication at all about what external funding might be available?
Not at that construction implementation level. In terms of a whiff, I've been asked to do an invoice for 55,000 to Regional Council to help support the modelling work. So there's a little bit, but that's very minor.
Ongoing. All right. Any further discussion? I'll get a mover and a seconder, please, to receive the report. Delly, you moving? Peter, thank you. All those in favour? Thanks, Amon. Much appreciated. You can stay for lunch if you want. Okay, we'll break for lunch. Those online, we will come back 1 o'clock, please.
Okay, thank you.